And we also just want to brush around our flange. Such a dirty word, flange. What's happening, my fellow geeks and geekettes? Welcome to a brand new episode of Cosplay Chris. And in today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys the process of molding, casting, and painting a 3D printed Robert Pattinson faceplate for Batman displays. So here is the print in question. This was an original file from Art Deving. It was then resin printed in China by a company called FactFox. I've been using FactFox for over a year. They're absolutely brilliant, cheap, affordable, and also do some crackerjack high definition resin prints. So here's how the print originally looked upon receiving it. It's a nice stark bone white. I then went ahead and sprayed it with some primer filler just to get rid of some print lines. There were a couple of print lines here and there on the nose and the forehead, but overall it has captured the pore detail absolutely beautifully. We then went ahead and got some playing cards and stuck them around the perimeter of the actual print, with the exception of the head here that had some duct tape put on just to seal it up a little bit more, and it was then glued to this board. So this is just prepping it for molding. Very simple, straightforward, and just helps if you've got a flange around the perimeter itself. We're going to be molding in silicone. We're going to be using Pinky Sil from Barnes. We're also going to be thickening up some of the silicone in certain parts to fill in the ears and undercuts of the jaw, etc. And then we're going to go in with a fiberglass jacket shell. Then after that, we're going to be using Bee Queen resin, which we're going to tint with some flesh tones. And I'm going to show you guys my method for doing the translucent flesh tint on these castings, much in the vein of my Ben Affleck mouth plates back in the day. This is going to be a pretty fun video. I love doing this type of stuff. So with that being said, let's get to it. All right, we're going to do our first coat. Now this is called a print coat. Usually the first coat and second coat of a brush on silicone mold is vital because you want to get in all that beautiful detail and minimize air bubbles. So we are using our Pinky Sil. Mix ratio is 100 to 100. So after eyeballing it, I reckon we could get away with about 50 grams each side. Yeah, so 50 grams each side, total combined weight of 100 grams should be pretty good. Now a lot of it is going to be excess, but I'd rather have excess than not enough. Now you really want to get in and mix this stuff up because sometimes the dregs can stay at the bottom and that comes out when you're doing your brush on mold, and sometimes it can impact the way the silicone cures. You may have some soft spots or some sticky spots where it hasn't properly cured from thorough mixing. Start to brush on all that beautiful detail. Now it isn't too hot here today, so gel time won't be too quick, but also you do want to have a sense of urgency when it comes to Pinky Sil. Okay, we do not want that bristle there, go away. And really with the disposable brush, just mush the silicone into all that detail. Now you can also grab an air compressor or an airbrush and start hitting it where there are air bubbles, or just do that. And we also just want to brush around our flange. Such a dirty word, flange. Who doesn't love a good flange, eh? I can feel it now starting to thicken and kick. So that is good. Okay, while the fourth coat is drying, I'm gonna lay in some silicone, bless you Gus, into this craft tray here. It's only a thin kind of depth. And I'm gonna tell you guys why we're gonna be doing that when this dries. But for now, I've mixed up 100 grams of silicone again. Again, whilst the fourth coat is drying, and this is gonna come into play later, but essentially what we're gonna do is just pour it into this tray. Originally, this is supposed to be like a canvas tray on like an easel, but we're just going to pour this into the tray itself. Now we're just going to give it a quick, very light hit with the blowtorch, and that is just going to dissipate any air bubbles, or most air bubbles for that matter. Now we're going to let that cure, and then we're going to carry on adding coats onto the Pattinson face itself. Okay, I wouldn't call this step a coat, but what we're going to be doing is using some Pinky Sil putty, exact same mix ratio, but this is a pliable putty that we can use to fill in the nose holes here. But also I'm going to go in and fill in this undercut here, because at the moment his beautiful chiseled jaw is actually an undercut. It's also going to inhibit the way that the fiberglass shell mold can lift off. So It's very easy to use, very user-friendly, just much like Pinky Seal itself. Essentially, this is acting as insurance for when we do the shell mold. It's gonna pop up with ease, because at the moment, it'll get stuck under here. So you just grab your part A, part B, and you have to kind of eyeball it. Like, it is quite forgiving in terms of mix ratio. Like, obviously, you don't want to be completely off. But if we just get 2 little putty balls like that, that looks pretty good. And then mush them together. So I'll just go in and plug up those nostrils. Now essentially it's just like sculpting with clay. We can blend that into the base Pinky Seal. That looks pretty good. I might just add a bit to his nose there because that's a bit of an undercut. Now I've got some left over here, so I'll go ahead and add that to the jaw undercut. Now I probably will need a bit more and have to mix up another batch, but for now that looks pretty good. Okay, now that we've given the Pinky Seal putty a bit of time to fully cure, it's nice and firm, we're gonna move on to our next coat, but this time we're gonna be thickening up the coat itself with some Sil-Fix silicone. So you literally just need a couple of drops of this stuff to your Pinky Seal mixture, and you're able to brush it on vertical surfaces. And this is kind of just gonna add a bit of bulk to the entire face. I'm probably gonna do 1 coat, see how it goes, then do another, and then we're gonna do some beauty coats just with regular Pinky Seal, and then we can move on to adding the keys. A little dab will do you. Now if you find it's starting to gel too quick and it's too thick in certain areas, you can spray isopropyl alcohol over the surface and brush it down. It won't affect the silicone, and if anything, it'll help you be able to smooth the silicone out. See, it's almost like a paste now. Really make sure you brush it into all that detail just so you avoid trapped air bubbles and stuff like that. So again, isopropyl alcohol, nice little light spray, and there you go. You can smooth it down like so, and it'll evaporate pretty quick, so it's not going to affect the curing of the silicone or inhibit its strength. It's more or less just for getting a nice, clean looking mold. So this is essentially going to act as keys, and that is a pretty ideal thickness for a key of this, like a rectangle key or a square key. You don't want it too overly thick, or otherwise you may run into a bit of a problem when you're doing your fiberglassing and it's not completely molding to the shape of the key. There we go. So what we're going to do is cut this into strips using a Stanley knife and a ruler. Alrighty, so we're getting ready to do the last coat, and when it starts to gel, I'm going to put these keys down. So this is for the forehead, the sides of the mold, the bottom sides of the mold. We've got the cheeks here and the chin. So they're all cut to size. Again, when the silicone starts to gel, that's when you place the keys down, because it's really going to grip onto it. And also if there's any curvature, it's going to stay in place because that silicone that is now gelling is now tacky. Alrighty, we're now ready to do our fiberglass shell. So I've got everything prepped and ready to go. We have our actual fiberglass matting here. We have the fiberglass resin. I'm going to be using the ProTite fiberglass resin. This stuff is very user friendly. The only reason I've got these small ones is because Bunnings didn't have the original big size ones. And if you're wondering why this has matte black on it, I had something on top to support that I was spraying matte black. So we're going to be using the rest of this and these 2 bits of resin. So we've got our mixing cup, we've got our disposable brushes, and we also have our catalyst hardener. You just need a few drops of these when we put our resin in the cup, swirl it up, and you're good to go. Now the reason why I've got this patch of silicone here is because we're going to brush on some of the resin, and each time we go to grab our fiberglass matting, we're going to put it on the patch here, and we're going to embed the resin on it, pre-soaking it before we put it on the actual mold. And also by pre-soaking your fiberglass matting, it just makes for a cleaner, smoother mold. Now I can't stress this enough, even though I'm not wearing it at the moment because I've already done my prep work and I'm just quickly filming this segment. Wear gloves and a respirator, geeks and geekettes. When it comes to this stuff, it is quite tenacious, it is quite gnarly, I can't stress that enough. Okay, now that the fiberglass is fully cured, we're gonna crack this off and also clean up the edges here. We've got all these nasty little shards. But first we're gonna grab some sandpaper and lightly sand over the entire surface just to get rid of any sharp tufts that may poke into us or anything when we're actually doing a casting. Alrighty, now that we're all demolded, we can start casting up in our Bee Queen resin. So I'm extremely happy with how this mold turned out. If you are doing a mold like this, it's best that you can leave it for 24 hours to essentially degas. It still has a bit of a smell of the fiberglass resin coming from the silicone, but if you let it sit for about a good 24 hours, even up to 48 hours if you've got a bigger mold, it just helps everything degas out of the silicone, and it's just gonna make for a better casting. Sometimes if you cast in resin or polyurethane, it can sometimes affect the curing of the casting itself, but very happy, it's sturdy in there, it's secure, those keys are amazing and just work wonders. So like I said, we're going to be using Bee Queen. This is a Part A, Part B mixed ratio, 100 to 100 from Barnes. We're also going to be very lightly tinting it with some flesh tint. Now I know this looks like a white pot of resin tint, but I've actually gone ahead and mixed up my own special batch of lighter flesh tone because we are casting a face of Robert Pattinson. He is a lot more pastier than Affleck, whereas opposed to where I'm casting an Affleck mouth plate, I do use a lot more of a tanner tint. So we've got our mixing cups, we've got our mixing sticks. Beforehand, you can either spray in some J-Wax or brush in some isopropyl alcohol just to really clean everything. You can also brush in some talcum powder. Talcum powder also helps with kind of drawing out the air bubbles and stuff like that. So ideally, I'm gonna probably be doing 5 or 6 slush coats. Now we're not gonna put a lot of tint in each batch. We're really gonna be using a small batch of resin with each one because we don't have much surface area to cover, but also we're trying to build up the layers of transparency when it comes to the flesh tint. It's kind of something I've tried to perfect over the years, and I was really happy with how those Affleck faces turned out, sorry, the Affleck mouth plates turned out. So it doesn't have to be perfect when we crack it out of the mold, it just has to be a pretty good blank canvas because then we can go in and do stuff by hand or airbrush. And obviously we're gonna have the black eye makeup smeared around, we'll be doing the lips, and also try to emulate his, I guess you could say 5 o'clock shadow. Even though Pattinson doesn't really have a 5 o'clock shadow, he still has a bit of stubble going on there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna glove up. We've got our gloves here. Now any excess resin that I don't use, I'm gonna try and pour back into a cup through the top here. Ideally, if I had more time, I would have made like a little pouring spout or reservoir here at the top that the resin could kind of pool into and pour it back into the cup, but for the most part, it'll work fine. I reckon we could get away with 80 grams total. Screw it, let's just go to 50. And if we end up using too much, at least we know we can back it off for the following coats. Now again, just a little dab will do you. That looks pretty good. Pour it in the mold. Yeah, I think 100 looks pretty good. Give it a nice slosh around. Sorry if the angles aren't ideal, but obviously I need to concentrate, but you guys get the idea with what's going on. Slosh it over the eyes, because the eyes are a high point sometimes. It doesn't want to fully cover them. Now, one thing I will suggest, if you guys are following this method, you want to pour out your excess before it really starts to gel. Otherwise, it's going to get really streaky with your castings and sort of uneven in a way. So I might just give it a little bit more. And Bee Queen sets really quick. If you're in a hot climate, you only have a couple of minutes max to work with this stuff. Yeah, so we'll probably definitely go 80 grams, I think, each coat after this. Alrighty, geeks and geekettes, it's now time to start painting the face and doing some washes. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky and a little bit complicated. I'm still learning the ropes of how to properly do skin tones, and that's why I can't stress enough that having a perfect blank canvas with your translucent resin and your tinting is vital. So what I've also found is if you have a black plastic bag at the back of a face casting like this, it really helps highlight all the shades and shadows and all that that's going on. The eyes have arrived from Tech Optics, so try to match it as best as possible to Pattinson's beautiful baby blue. And a little bit of futzing was required to get the eyes properly proportioned for these eyes. Now, keep in mind, if they aren't fitting properly, you can also go in with a heat gun and make it soft and then push the eyes in. But look at that, how creepy is that? Ooh, he's looking around everywhere. So anyway, we're gonna get to the washes. So first up, we're gonna be using the Sideshow Collectibles method. You guys know that video of that gentleman painting the Superman head, and he started off with a yellow and a red wash. So we're gonna be using just some student acrylic paints watered down in this cup here. We're gonna do a first pass of a yellow, dab away the excess, and then a second pass of a red, wipe away the excess, and assess where we're at. Now in terms of the lips, now like I did with the McFarlane Toys Pattinson, I did use just pretty much a straight brown shoe polish on his lips, but I'm thinking we're gonna start off with a Hot Pink Pearl from Model Masters. This is an acrylic paint, and the brush I use when I'm painting lips is the fan brush. It just really gives you a natural kind of look on the lips, and also the streaky look that our lips have, like the deep recesses and stuff like that we have in our lips from being dried and cracked and stuff like that. Now we're also going to be using this Hot Pink Pearl for the fleshy pink parts of his eyes, the inner parts of his eyes and around the perimeter. Now when it comes to the black eye makeup, I want it to be pronounced here, but also streaky. Like it kind of streaks out like how he looks when he has the cowl off, but also when we put this in a cowl, it's gonna all blend in with the cowl here, but also when you take it off, I do want it nice and streaky and just natural looking. Pattinson's stubble is interesting. It doesn't join up properly when he's got a 5 o'clock shadow, so that is gonna be just using some black washes, maybe just some severely watered down black shoe polish and build up just a nice bit of 5 o'clock shadow. You can go in, I have gone in with the past with the Batfleck faceplates with a Sharpie and done the dots. It looks good, but up close, it kind of looks a bit phony. But before we get to any of that, we're gonna do our yellow wash and our red wash, see where we're at, and then follow that up with the Hot Pink Pearl for the lips, the eyes, and then probably back that up with a brown shoe polish over the lips. So with that being said, let's get to it. Now when it comes to the lips, less is more. We've got our fan brush with our Hot Pink Pearl, just dabbed in a little bit of water, and you just slowly build it up. You can see how the yellow and reds complement everything and just kind of bring everything together, and just, it's all about subtlety. And Pattinson, you know, he's pasty. So he has a very interesting complexion going on, and it's just very touch and go at this point. But when you reach that happy medium, you will know. And again, just building up the Hot Pink Pearl, especially on the corners here. That's when you can go in and wipe away the excess and just get a nice fan down, fan swoop of how the lips should go. What I'm gonna do is take the pre-existing watered down Hot Pink Pearl and just add the littlest bit of brown shoe polish to it. And from what I've seen, there is a hint of brown and pink kind of mixed in on lips. So again, it's one of those things where we could probably add just a smidge more water, but I think we can get away with it. Again, you can wipe away excess if you think there's too much. You just want some sparingly on your fan brush. Pretty good to me, and also fill in the line there, and that just gives a bit more depth. Alrighty guys, I do apologize for the shift in lighting. It's just started raining here and it's gotten quite dark, so I had to turn on the kitchen lights and it kind of makes things a bit warmer. But anyway, regardless of that, we're now moving on to the eyebrows and the stubble. So I've gone ahead and done a test and had a bit of a breakthrough. So what I did was, we have our pre-existing fan brush here. I cut off each end of a fan brush that was on the fritz that was starting to go. And this is what we're going to be using to painting on our eyebrows. So I mixed up some black student acrylic with some black shoe polish here. And literally what you do is get a little bit on these bristles and just wisp them on like so. Again, I know Rob has thicker eyebrows, but when we go to do the black panda eye makeup, the black panda eye makeup is going to blend in. This is kind of just to give it a bit more form and give his face a bit more structure, because you look at people that don't have eyebrows, shave their eyebrows off, it just looks incomplete, if that makes sense. So this is essentially just adding a bit of detail. Now when it comes to the stubble, again, very subtly we're going to be doing his 5 o'clock shadow, and that is just going to be watered down black shoe polish. Most notably, obviously across the upper lip. Now we have two sides here and also a little bit on the chin, but there is a split in the stubble here, in his stubble pattern, as if when he has a close clean shave, there is just fresh skin there and no actual 5 o'clock shadow. I'll just give you guys a nice close-up look. It does really help that the actual print itself includes eyebrows, so you've got a nice guide there to go with, where it kind of fans out and then swoops back in a traditional eyebrow way. Also keep in mind, you want to be a bit sporadic, because you know, the eyebrows do have feral hairs, you know, little random wisps down the bottom here, even though this part is predominantly going to be covered by the panda eye makeup, but also tapering out. And I have noticed that Rob's eyebrows do really thicken up on the sides here, and there's quite a few like strands and stragglers on the top here. Alrighty, the last step is to do the panda eyes and then seal the face casting up. Now, I want to address, if anyone's curious, why I'm not adding eyelashes. When it comes to eyelashes on resin castings, it just doesn't look right. It's one of those things where you need eyelashes on, say, a silicone casting where you can punch them in one at a time. Whereas with fake eyelashes, you have that weave, that black weave, and it just takes away from the realism of the inlets of the eyes there. So we're going to be foregoing eyelashes, and once the panda eyes are on there, you're not really going to notice it, even though Pattinson does have a beautiful set of eyelashes. Overall, I'm really happy with how the lips have turned out, the subtle 5 o'clock shadow. And what's interesting, when I try and photograph this thing, it changes in different lighting situations. I want to light it as best as possible for the final reveal, just so you guys get an idea of what I'm looking at, as opposed to the camera changing it. But anyway, in terms of the panda eyes, we're going to be using an oil color, and why we're going to be using oil color is we want that streakiness, but at the same time we want the bold black around here, so when we put this in the cowl, it's going to all blend in, but at the same time we want that beautiful streakiness when this is out of the cowl. And I just feel that using oil color, you're able to control that a lot more. Now, when we are finished with the panda eyes, usually this takes a very long time to dry. Usually it takes about 24 hours for oil color to fully cure, but by applying a matte varnish over the casting, it's essentially gonna seal up the face and also set the black oil color instantly. Now also keep in mind, like I said, I just kinda lightly did his eyebrows because there is gonna be streaks of the panda eyes going up there, trickling down there. I'm going to be using the Prime 1 statue as reference for the panda eyes. I think that just is going to work best. And then once that's done, we're going to call it a day, and I'll show you guys how this looks in my GC5 FX Pattinson cowl. Also, one more thing, I'm not permanently fixing the eyes in place. I want him looking in that direction. So what I do when I usually sell, you know, 1-to-1 scale bust to clients with Tech Optics eyes, I send 2 strips of blue tack, and what I do is I wrap the blue tack around the eye, put it in the back and smush it in, and that way you can change the eye direction if you want. I'm one of those people where I change my mind. I want him looking that way, up, down. even googly-eyed, whatever you want. And just having the blue tack in there makes that a lot more easier as opposed to permanently fixing in there and then all of a sudden changing your mind. Vengeance. And there we go, guys. The Robert Pattinson 3D print translucent resin casting faceplate is done and dusted. I'm really trying to capture how this piece truly looks in real life, so that's why I've had to drop the exposure down a bit. That's why I look a bit dark and the background looks a bit dark. But just to give you guys a close look at everything, it is a lot more paler showing and reading on the camera, but it just gives you a good idea of the details that have gone into it. Let me actually just try dropping it just a bit more. Okay, there we go. So that gives you a good idea of the subtle 5 o'clock shadow going on, all the lip work, and the panda eyes. And I'm just over the moon with how it's turned out. Skin is one of the hardest things to replicate. There's so many layers involved. And what I did was probably the beginner's level compared to the pros that do it at effect shops and for film and TV and stuff like that. Now, it'd be rude not to try the faceplate in my GC5 Effects Pattinson cowl, so we're gonna do that and call it a day. Pretty good overall. My only critique also is I probably could have gone a bit further out with the panda eyes, but also I do like the effect of how it's all streaky. But if you were using this faceplate permanently in the cowl, you could just go full stark black and really expand upon it just so it fills out the areas. And also keep in mind that this cowl wasn't made specifically for this 3D print in particular. So it'd be one of those things where you need a bit of futzing and maybe even tightening the neck here so it really hugs under the chin there. But overall, I'm really happy with the end result. So thanks very much for watching, guys. This is probably a very random video, but I just wanted to show you the process and all the things involved with trying to replicate human skin. It's one of those things where I love learning about it and continuing to learn about it. And I don't think I will ever stop learning about it. With that being said, wherever you are in the world, please have yourselves an absolute cracker of a day. I hope you're well, hope you're happy, be merry, be silly. And until next time, geeks, please always remember, cosplayers do it best.